Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in tonight. Some out of necessity, some hopefully perhaps came because they just wanted to see what local government was doing. Welcome to the Town of Smithfield Planning Commission meeting for August 8, 2023. Would you please stand and join me for Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. First thing on our agenda tonight is Community Development and Planning Director's Report. Director Clary, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The consultants who are currently updating our entrance corridor overlay guidelines will be present at the Tuesday, September 12th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to provide an update and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 2 is upcoming meetings and activities. Tuesday, August 15th, 6:30 p.m. That will be held at 6:30 p.m. Board of Historic and Architectural Review meeting. The Board of Zoning Appeals that was scheduled for the 15th, 7:30 has been canceled. August 21st, Town Council Committee meetings would be held at 3 p.m. Tuesday, September 5th, 6:30 p.m. Town Council meeting. And if necessary, Tuesday, September the 12th, 6:30 p.m. Planning Commission meeting. All those meetings will be held here at the center. Item number 3 is public comments. And public doesn't seem to have signed up for anything. Do we have anyone? No? Seeing none? Item number 3 is closed. Public comments. Number 4, Planning Commission comments. Hearing any? Well, I would like to move this past item number 6, past the public hearing, because I have a couple of cans of worms I want to open up. Hopefully it won't take too long to discuss. So if we can move that, if no one has any objection to moving the item number 4 below item 6.
Sure,
Hearing
that's
done?
fine. Yeah, no problem.
No objection? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5, and I asked that request with number 4 because I didn't want to hold the applicants up unnecessarily if they had something else they wanted to do, instead of waiting so long after our discussion. Item number 5 is entrance corridor overlay application after the fact. This is 13458 Benz Church Boulevard, BP gas station, Global Montello Group Corporation, care of Tabitha Galding, the applicant. Could we have the report, please?
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking after-the-fact approval for the entrance corridor overlay review. This is for a color change and sign installation on the existing diesel canopy structure located at the rear of the property. The structure previously featured a light gray band outlined by white rectangles on all 4 sides with no additional signage. The applicant has changed the color of the structure to feature a white band across the top, a thin blue band in the middle, and a red band at the bottom. This would be on all 4 sides, with 2 of the sides featuring global signage. These are located on the left side of the structure, facing Cypress Run Drive and is visible from Ben's Church Boulevard. The second sign is on the rear of the canopy, which faces Cypress Run Plaza. Both signs are 9 feet by 10 inches wide by 3 feet tall, for a total of approximately 29.5 square feet each. This application was tabled at the Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting so that the applicant and/or owner could be present. Town staff do recommend that approval would be contingent under the applicant submitting a sign permit application and the corresponding $30 application fee. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant being here, would you like to speak on behalf of your application?
Yes, sir. My name is Donald Lohr. I am a construction project manager for Global Partners, who is the master partner of Global Montello Group, the owner of the property. Global Partners acquired the property in early 2022, and since then we have made what we believe are primarily cosmetic improvements to the property to make it cleaner, brighter, and more appealing to our customers. As far as the diesel canopy is concerned, we inadvertently replaced the diesel canopy graphics, which would be the colors on the fascia, without obtaining a permit. And, you know, we're here to rectify that, as well as the 2 signs that were installed on the canopy. So we're requesting permit for the graphics as installed and the signs as installed, and hoping that the commission will see through that. What I can also add is that since Global Partners has acquired the property a little more than a year ago, we've added new gasoline dispensers with EMV technology for secure credit card transactions. We've updated the light fixtures to LED on both canopies and the yard lights. We have upgraded the building sidewalk to eliminate a dangerous steel curb. We have painted the store, the canopies, the kerosene tank, the ID sign, and the light poles. We've replaced some concrete on our tank pad. Installed a new diesel island. We seal coated and restriped the driveway to make the parking area in the driveway more appealing and more sound. We've upgraded the ID sign with LED price panels, and we've addressed several compliance items on the fueling system that were lax before Global acquired the property.
Okay, thank you, sir. Planning Commission, you have any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add that, you know, we appreciate that the improvements you're making. I don't really have a problem with your presenting tonight. We just prefer that we do this not after the fact.
Agreed, certainly. And, you know, I can't speak for my contractor, but, you know, my contractor, I think, should have been a little more proactive in getting the permits before we did the work.
Sure. Well, anything you guys do move forward, you know, if you just want to check with Tammy, she'll be happy to work with you. We try and be business friendly and easy to work with here, and happy to make your job a little bit easier. And with that said, I make a motion that we approve this with the zoning recommendations as presented.
Second.
Can I make that?
I'm sorry, Dr. Pope.
Have y'all acquired the whole property? Because there was some discussion at our previous meeting. Is the diesel section separate than the rest of the structures?
The survey I have shows it as one parcel. You know, that I believe that's the case. I'm not absolutely certain of it, but the diesel parcel and this parcel where the gasoline fueling and the store is, again, on my survey, is shown as one parcel.
Are there any future improvements to the BP color and all of that? Is all that going to stay the same as a BP station, or is that planning to change? Are those graphics planning to change, and will they be in compliance with this color scheme?
There are no current plans to change the brand of the fuel from BP. We elected to go with Global on the truck fueling because Global is not a well-known brand in this area. There's only a handful of Global stations in the state of Virginia, or Commonwealth of Virginia. But truckers will know it because they're more widespread in their travels than what our gasoline customers at this location will be.
Let the applicant answer my question, who Global is. I was not familiar with them. And I was curious about the relationship with BP and Global. And you just explained that.
Well, Global Partners is a fuel distributor, and we have over 1,700 locations, primarily in New England. It's just been in recent years that the company has branched out from New England into the Philadelphia market, and now into the Southern Virginia market, And actually, in the past 2 months, Global Partners has acquired 64 locations in Houston, Texas. So the company is, it's a master limited partnership that's trying to grow and become a fuel distributor across the country. As a fuel distributor, we actually have 12 brands, I believe, that we can offer. And, you know, what makes one station a BP and the next one a Shell and the one after that another brand, depends largely on the brands. You know, we can put a location out and show it to the oil companies and find out what their level of interest is. I believe this location has been a BP for a while. It was certainly a BP when Global acquired it, and there are no plans to change the gasoline fueling from BP at this time.
Okay, so Global owns the BP station now.
Global owns the property,
Okay.
yes.
All right, thank you. Any oth-
My comment probably would go under planning commission comments more. I'm upset that these after-the-fact approvals seem to be coming very frequently. Not just this situation, but it seems like everybody comes and begs forgiveness, and I don't know, I'm just very concerned about that.
I think if we change the fine, or increase the fine, we'll get less, or
Yeah, I would request, if I may, an official presence on site. You know, if somebody catches somebody doing work, make sure there's a permit for it. If there's not a permit, bring it up right then and there.
I believe, Dr. Claire, you can verify this. I believe that's how this came about. Someone noticed.
Yes, sir, that is correct. We were notified that there was after-the-fact changes happening at the property. And then at that point, we tried to reach out to find out who was responsible for these changes so that we could get all of the information to bring it before the Planning Commission.
Yes. And to Mr. Davidson's point, I think we've expressed our dismay with these after-fact permits or requests several times, but what tools do we have to make it undesirable to do such a thing?
Can I ask, did you have to have a building permit to do this? From the county?
County, no. We did, well,
No,
let me
no
clarify, sir. We did obtain a building permit from the county for the fueling upgrades that we did.
For fueling upgrades, okay, but not for the, there was
Not for
no.
signage, for graphics.
Well, this goes back to the problem that we've had for quite some time, and we keep talking about it, and we need to move further down the road with it, but it seems, the town doesn't have its own, building officials. And we have been in discussions, and we need to resume these discussions to potentially, have a town staff member who is also perhaps a deputy building official. And that would be, one way to at least have a presence in town that can look for stuff like this. We've spoken about this with the town council at length about this in particular, and I'm getting a little bit off track, but I'm just gonna tell you, you recall how the town doesn't have the authority to use the historic ordinance anymore to require people to do certain things, but you can use the building code, and so it kind of goes to the same thing you're talking about. We need a town, someone in the town on staff who can be more proactive about this, because frankly, the county, they're short-staffed and they don't look for it, and most of this type of thing is done on the complaint basis. When people make complaints to the town staff, that's how you find out about it.
And if I can say one more thing, we did obtain a permit for the fueling upgrades, and we did obtain a permit for the ID sign modifications. We added the LED price panels. The canopy, I guess contractor didn't think that was under the purview of a permit.
Any other?
I like Mr. Gibbs' comment that, you know, if we're going to continue to address these, and again, not this application aside, but after the fact permits, we start putting fines. Yeah, we'll approve it, that's fine, but, you know, it's $500, it's $1,000 fine for being after the fact. Do we even have the ability to do that?
You have to see, only if the state law allows it.
Yeah, I don't know if it does.
About 1%,
Huh?
1%.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's not permitted.
$500 to a major regional shipping oil company.
I understand that, but I'm almost 1,000% sure that the state code would not permit such a fine.
Right, I got
Well, the percentage, but not the 500.
Well, would you look, Mr. Reddick, and see if it's available to us as a tool, and then if so, ways that we could implement that
Yes.
into our code in the future?
Sure.
Yes, I would be in favor of that. Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second. Question is to, after the fact, approve this application as presented with staff condition that the applicant gets the permit. That is a sign fee, $30 sign fee?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Call for the question.
Mr. Davison?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Swecker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion carries. The application's been approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next on the agenda, we have item number 6. This is a public hearing. Special use permit application. This is a short-term rental. This is 111 Institute Street. Sean Homer is the applicant. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. The applicant is seeking approval to rent 111 Institute Street, which is an existing single-family residential dwelling, as a short-term and long-term rental property. According to the zoning ordinance, short-term rentals as principal uses are permissible by a special use permit only. No changes to the property are proposed in order to accommodate this short-term rental. The positives of this application is it does provide additional accommodations in the heart of the historic district. Negatives, it is not a by right use and does require a special use permit. Approval should be conditioned on the applicant following the conditions outlined in Article 2Z1A through I, except for B. These conditions do require a signed and notarized short-term rental affidavit ensuring compliance. For your convenience, A through I follows this staff report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Claire, why did you suggest that he does not need to follow Z1B? Short-term rentals shall be permitted for not more than 104 nights per calendar year.
So this would allow it as a primary use of the property, so he would be allowed to exceed the 104 nights per calendar year.
Okay, and why did you recommend that? I'm trying to understand that.
Because he's getting a special use permit in order to operate a full-time, short-term rental unit.
It's not one rental for 104 nights, it's
Correct.
it's multiple rentals that may add up to over 104.
Well, one of our ordinances is always, we didn't allow more than 104, which was every weekend, right? That was our thought process on 52 weeks a year. And so this would allow this to be obviously more than that. I'm just struggling, and I don't have a problem with it. I'm just trying to understand what the difference is between doing a short-term rental and this allowing more than 104. I'm still not following why we would make that exception. Was that exception asked for?
That is in order to acquire the short-term rental special use permit as a primary use of the property. The 104 nights would trigger it. If it was more than that, that would be the sole use of the property, the primary use of the property.
Okay. So this is a short-term rental property. So if this gentleman wanted to rent his house on a month-to-month basis, like a rental unit, like rest of the world is kind of used to, would that require any additional permitting?
Not from us, no,
Not
sir.
from us, okay. But because he wants to do it, operate it as short-term rentals, that's what requires it. And
Yes,
so
sir.
we're saying that, well, that's fine, and that's a primary use of this property, so we're going to waive the 104 nights.
That is the acquisition of the special use permit is in order to not have to comply with the 104 nights. That would allow this to be just the primary use of the property.
Okay, so some of the homes we've approved in the past are like Airbnb style properties. Are they not primarily used as short-term rentals, and that's why we limit them to the nights?
They also requested the exception to not have to comply with the 104, so that they could be functioning as short-term rentals as their primary use.
Okay, so the owner of this property has bought the property with the intention of just making it for short-term rentals, and that's what he's seeking permission from us to do.
Correct.
So follow-up to that, probably what Ms. Hilligas is going to suggest in a few minutes based on her email. Can we put a limitation on the special use permit that we only grant it for 12 months, 24 months before it has to come back up to say, is this still an appropriate use of this property? Can we put an expiration date on the special use permit?
I think you can, because it's a special use permit. It's not like a by right zoning type thing. Yeah, I think you can. It's, the information he provides says he doesn't intend for it to be more than 100 feet.
We clarified with the applicant that he was seeking an application for a special use permit for full use of the property. There was some confusion on that, but he wanted to go ahead and move forward with the special use permit to acquire the short-term rental as a full primary use of the property.
With a special use permit, you can put conditions on it, so you can have it reviewable for 12 months if you want to.
I just feel like there should be some expiration date. I don't know if 12 months is appropriate or not, but I think there should be, in other words, we don't want to look at this 10 years later and say, hey, where are we with this? I think it should be some expiration date, at least to review it again and say, is that still primarily?
So,
The goal.
yeah.
Well, if we start getting complaints, we can review it and
Well,
revoke it.
you
at
can
the
always
time.
revoke them. If a special use permit can be revoked if it's, because it's a special use permit.
So I like Dr. Pope's thought process here, but I also don't want to be at a burden of the applicant. So if we said, 12 months or 2 years or whatever we thought was appropriate, I don't want them to have to come in, because a special use permit is what, $400 to
Yes,
apply
sir.
for, something like that? Perhaps we could put it so it could be administratively extended. And that way, because I think your thought process is that if we maybe a year or two down the road think we're having too many of these or there's issues or something like that, we can revoke it.
Well, I think that might be the discussion later. I'm
Yeah.
not sure, but
No, I think that's interesting thought process, so it doesn't give it to it for forever. But I'd like to, if there aren't any problems and we don't care 2 years down the road, I also don't want it to be a burden on the applicant. So maybe we could do that and allow for it to happen
But
administratively.
I think you would have to, I don't think you can revoke this administratively. I think you'd have to do it by action of the, you'd have to take affirmative action to do it. It seems to me you might want to make it, subject to review as part of your,
Every 2 years.
Yes. If we could set some sort of time limit on it, like Dr. Pope
just
said,
make it subject to.
that it would be reviewed. Not
Otherwise, if it's not subject,
not necessarily have to go through the whole process again, but,
subject to review by the planning commission.
right.
But to be clear now, at this point, we're having a public hearing. The applicant is not here. I assume the applicant is not here. I don't see anyone here. And we didn't have anyone sign up. So are we moving on to
Well,
planning commission?
open it and close it.
Comments?
Yes.
Close your public hearing.
Open it.
Close it.
Open and close it.
The public hearing was open and no one spoke. The applicant's not here. Public comments section of that hearing, of this hearing, is closed. Planning commission comments. Please continue.
What happens if I buy that property from him? Does that special use permit transmit to me, or does it revoke automatically upon sale of the property, and then I have to reapply for short-term
Follows
rental.
the property.
So would that also be a limitation to say special use permit would then be void at the sale or transfer of the property?
I think you could do that.
We can't do that, but we could say it's reviewable every 24 months.
Well, the review thing is really nothing more than effectively a tickler for the planning commission to bring it back on its agenda to make sure everything is as it should be. You don't have, if everything is fine, you take no action.
So can it be reviewed upon transfer of the property in addition to whatever time limit we set?
Zoning designations, and this is in hybrid of zoning, the general legal principle is it follows the property, it's not the individual or the owner. So I think that's
Pushing it.
a reach.
But we could look at it every 2 years or whatever time we set on it. And that way, if it sells within that time frame, it's not a forever.
And the thing about it is, if you get complaints, you're gonna review it sooner than that.
So if we approved it and 6 months later, it's not panning out so well, we can revoke the special use permit?
Yes, you can. If he's not abiding, if you find that he's not abiding by the requirements, you can't revoke it just because you don't like it.
Well,
Or that there's a
that's the part
complaint.
that I would like to be able to revoke it if we don't like it, if we get there, because other cities have had issues with short-term rentals. We have not.
Right.
And I hope we don't.
But if you find that there are issues and it's not working because of the applicant is not doing, theoretically, if they do all the things they're supposed to do, which are part of your ordinance and the conditions under which you can get a special use permit, then there should be no issues. But if there's excessive noise, if there's parking issues, if there are complaints by neighbors because of whatever, then that would be the basis for revoking the special use permit.
Do such conditions need to be outlined in the ordinance?
They are.
And
They
all the-
already are.
They are.
Sorry.
I mean, you can look at I right there. That's an easy one. That has to deal with noise. Oh, I'm sorry, not I. Which one? H. To protect the citizens of the town from excessive noise, short-term rentals must comply with Chapter 38 of the Town Code. Although noise is very difficult to
It is.
Subjective.
enforce.
But I understand we have, the police department has decibel meters, so, that's something that can be enforced.
So far, I'm not convinced we need to do anything.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm not convinced we need to do anything. We're looking at these conditions here, particularly the one you just said, H, in reference to excessive noise. There are things that if someone is not in compliance, would bring it, excuse me, would bring it back to the attention of the planning commission where we can act upon it then. Why would we automatically want to just bring things back or set a timetable to bring things back if it's not particularly necessary?
I think it should be
Reviewed?
reviewed thank you, at least every 2 years.
But if it's just a matter of saying, okay,
We don't know this is gonna be a matter of just saying, okay.
People will get complacent. I mean, I have rentals, and I have short-term rentals. People will get complacent, and they'll push the envelope a little bit farther. You'll find them parking in places they shouldn't be parking. I mean, stuff happens, so, I think it should be massaged every 2 years.
Seems to me that you ought to make it, I'm just suggesting you make it reviewable on the first anniversary and then every 2 years thereafter.
Good idea.
That's a little better.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay.
Does that need to be in the ordinance? Do we need to look at the ordinance
Yeah,
change with
would
that?
That would be in your condition of approval.
So,
But
Mr.
would it be
Chairman,
applicable to all properties in the future?
only if we say so.
Only if you say so.
That would require an ordinance change, which we can't do here, but we could do afterwards, and that's one of the things that I'd ask us to consider later this evening. So,
You got away without it, basically.
how about I move that we approve this application as presented with staff recommendations, in addition to review of this special use permit at its anniversary date, and then every 2 years after.
Second.
Does that make sense? You guys okay with that motion? I can change it if we need to change it.
Makes sense.
That's a motion?
Yes, sir.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. The motion is to approve this special use permit for long-term and short-term rentals with the conditions set forth by town staff and as the conditions recommended by Mr. Peck, Commissioner Peck. Call for the question.
Dr. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Swecker?
Yes.
Mr. Pack?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hilligas?
Yes.
And Chairman Bryan?
Yes,
Thank you.
the motion's approved. Application is approved.
Chairman, can we have a little bit of discussion on short-term rentals in
Please.
general?
Well, item 6 is approved, so this will be the time for planning commission comments. Yes, please continue.
Yeah, so I'd email you all and ask you to consider what we think is an appropriate amount and the locations for these short-term rentals in town. I read about issues that other communities have, and we're fortunate, we haven't had them. And it's great if we don't, and I think it'd be kind of cool if Smithfield was, you know, a vacation home kind of town a little bit. You know, so I think what we just did tonight, though, might solve all of that, is if we petition council to change our ordinance to add that the special use permits are reviewable at their 1-year anniversary, and then every 2 years after that, that may solve all that, because I don't know that I could put a number that we should have, you know, 10 or 15 or 100 short-term rentals, whether we should only allow them downtown but not in neighborhoods. I don't know that I'm prepared to be that general in it. But if we allowed one in Wellington Estates by special use permit, and somebody was there and it wasn't going well, we'd have a mechanism to remove it. And right now, I don't feel like we have a mechanism to remove anything, but if we change our ordinance to include what we included on the special use permit we just approved, that may help that some. Help this future potential issue that we don't have. I hate to try and find solutions to problems we don't have, but this is a problem that is in other communities, it just is not in ours right now, and hopefully it won't be. Any other thoughts or?
It's understandable.
Well, the fact that it's a special use permit to begin with gives you pretty much what you need to revoke it. So if it's not working out, no matter how long it's been there,
Correct.
you can revoke the special use permit. And that's likely to be a complaint-driven thing. That's what other areas have seen. This one, for instance, if you've got 10 people staying in that house, there's going to be an issue. If the house doesn't look that big.
Well, you know, it's interesting too, because our ordinance says that we can have no more than 10 guests, but also no more than 2 per bedroom at any one time. I don't know how many bedrooms are in that home, but
Yeah, I don't know.
it didn't look to be a 5-bedroom
Not
home.
5. Willing to bet money. Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify with the 104 nights, short-term rentals are permissible by right, as long as they don't exceed the 104 nights. It's just if it's going to be a principal use of the property as the short-term rental.
Okay.
So we could rent our house as a short-term rental while we're off on vacation by right.
Every weekend.
Wait,
Oh,
without,
if
without,
only I could have that many vacations.
no, wait, you saying about right, without a special use permit?
That is correct. If it is just the primary use of the property as a short-term rental, that is what triggers the special use permit.
But anyone who owns a home, as you said, on vacation could just do it by right. Okay, understandable.
Most HOAs put things in place to keep you from doing that, so.
Okay. What about density? We were talking about, you mentioned density, some districts and other towns only permitted certain
It's usually
zoning.
per bedroom, and it's also linked to available parking spaces. They have to prove enough available parking spaces per bedroom, say. You have to have at least 2 off-street parking spaces available in Virginia Beach, say, or more.
Well, it could be complicated, and I bring this up.
Right, because not everybody in downtown in particular is not going to have off-street parking dedicated necessarily.
Yes, but I was concerned about how many would be allowed, and that could be complicated, how many would be allowed in a particular district. Because in experience, sometimes I often not go to Florida for vacation, and we would use this Airbnb, these short-term rentals, and there were certain communities where there were practically probably 4 out of 5 were short-term rentals, and the one resident that was permanent would be quite upset with that.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you don't have to grant a special use permit. That's why they have to come to you. If you get to the point where you think there are too many, you wouldn't grant anymore.
and that's my point. How will we track that? How will we know that?
That's what they do.
That's what Tammy does.
You would tell us how many of them.
Yes, similar to what we included in this application, we identified the other 2 previously approved short-term rentals that did acquire the special use permit.
And the application provides additional accommodations in the heart of the historic district. That's your recommendation? Okay.
But if I wanted to rent my house out to somebody for 90 days, that would still be under the legal limit because it's under 104.
Correct.
What's the difference between that and a sublease where if I'm a military person, get transferred to Florida and I just want to keep my house here and lease it? How is that different from a long-term versus a short-term?
You can do that.
Military also has special exceptions.
Well, military's not a good example. I just up and leave, go to Florida.
But that's,
So,
if you decide to move to Florida, you want to keep your house, you can rent it 365 days a year to one individual. And it doesn't require to a family or an individual. It doesn't require any permits. People do that all the time. There's lots of people that own property purely for rental.
So that's in a different category than this.
yeah, the short-term rentals for rentals less than 30 days. That's how we defined it. And that's what the trigger is.
Basically Airbnbs,
Yeah.
this is what they are.
Airbnbs, or in this region,
Bring it back.
outages for the power plant. That's very common.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you limit number.
Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe it's a problem we don't have yet. But we have, there were 3, give or take, that were grandfathered. And then we've had 2, now 3, so there's 6 in town. I would not say that 6 is too many. I don't know what number I would say is too many, but 6 certainly isn't it.
Less than 5. Cottages.
I'm guessing there are
Just joking.
there's
Too
probably
soon,
about
Doc, too soon.
3,000 single-family residences in town, so that's a pretty minuscule.
Pretty minuscule number, yeah. And then Mr. Gibbs was right too, like, many homeowners associations don't allow for them in specific, in their HOA, so.
Right.
And that's done by neighborhood and not by us. Well, something to keep in mind as we go through. I don't think we need to probably do anything based on conversation tonight, but just worthy of the discussion. So thank you for the time, Chairman.
Well, no further discussion on that. I would like to comment on some things. This past week, I attended the town council, meeting, and I made comments. After those comments, I was asked a question by Mayor Bowman about the vote concerning the Grange at 10 Main, in particular to the height restrictions waiver that was denied. I was asked, did I think, in light of the comments subsequent to that vote by Dr. Pope, and I think some concerns, some comments from others, did I think that the vote would have changed based on those comments? And point blank, I just made a blanket statement that I did not think it would have changed, but I want to explain that in more detail. Concerning the comments, I think the waivers more appropriately should have been broken down into 3 questions. Would the height restriction waiver pass if it was applied to the hotel, which was a 3-story building, just over 35 feet? And hearing you all's comment, I think the vote it might have been approved based on the comments. Concerning the 3-story apartments, based on your comments, subsequent comments, I think that may have been approved as far as the height restriction waiver. But on the 3rd point, the 4th-story building, that is where I was making my point. I do not think that aspect of the waiver would have been approved. Any comments?
That was the point of my motion, correct?
And I agree with the way you've just presented it. And I think that nothing would have changed if it would have been put the way you just explained it.
Okay.
I would have still voted the way I voted.
Okay. Any other comments? No? Well, the second point I would like to discuss, and this is also due to what happened at the town council meeting last week. I have noticed this. I've noticed this in the past and never addressed it. But also during the 10 Main application, Councilman Mike Smith brought up the point that there were several requests put out to different agencies where some were not answered. There was no comment, there was no reply. I have seen this, and this is based on my experience from when I was working. In such instances, the way this would be handled where I formerly worked, whenever a project would start, it was a requirement that a particular group of the department would send out a notice to everyone that they thought would be involved. Everyone throughout the organization who would be involved. They would send out this notice, and it was expected that everyone who had a stake in that project would respond. Due diligence, they would respond. And there would be a statement added to that notice that if you did not respond, or if you did not attend, then the main customer would assume that either you're in agreement with what's being presented, or you have no stake in what's being presented. So we would move on. Oftentimes we didn't get a response from an agency or a department, so we just move on. Now that's the way I approach it, that's the way I look at it. But hearing Councilman Smith's concerns with this, Is there anything, any of you have any idea, anything, the comments to say, how we should address this when we get no comment from any agency? Any ideas how we should address this going forward?
Well, how can you enforce VDOT or anybody else to provide this information? We request it. I mean, we don't have the authority to tell VDOT what to do, as far as I know.
Okay, granted.
Or we put out, and I understand what you're saying, Charles, because we've put out requests to the school districts, and we've put out requests that, and sometimes we just don't get any response.
And that's where I
And,
think they,
and we just, you know, I guess we just move along. I don't know. We don't really have any
You have
authority.
no authority to make them respond. I think you have to assume, I mean, maybe Tammy's letter can, you send a transmittal letter, Tammy?
Yes, so just so that I can clarify Councilman Smith's concern about the Smithfield Public Works and Utility Department having no comments, their comments had already been addressed. They were submitted and addressed, and I apologize for the confusion. It should have been that they don't have any additional comments at this time on this completed application package. This does go out to all of those agencies for review and comment, and internally, any comments that staff have, we make the applicants address them before we bring the project and the application before Planning Commission and Town Council to make sure that all of our comments have been addressed.
okay.
Thank you.
And I would think, I thought I had seen where the fire department had responded. Would that be the case?
We did not receive comments from the fire department. We did receive comments from the police department.
Okay.
If she sends a transmittal letter, maybe it should say, please respond. If you do not respond, we will assume that you have no concerns about the project as presented, and leave it at that. Okay, and then maybe your comment in your staff report will be that something to that effect. That no, in the case of Public Works, you would have said all comments have been previously addressed. There are no additional comments. Maybe that would have been more appropriate. You didn't do anything wrong, it's just the way he interpreted it.
Yes, and I apologize. And again, you know, this is the rezoning aspect of it and the special use permit. When we do get the site plans
Yeah.
for the project, they will also go out for review and comment when we have more specific information.
Okay. I bring this up so that the planning commission, it appears that we are doing due diligence when these applications come before us.
Yes.
I would think your assumption is correct. They accept it as presented.
But if they don't say anything to the contrary, you have to assume that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
But to Tammy's point, like just using Public Works as an example, on a project like their big concerns would be, do you have sufficient water capacity? Do you have sufficient sewer capacity? And, you know, are there any major improvements to the system that will have to be made in order to accommodate that? That's the large view of the project. All the details come at a later time. And that's, you know, there'll be, you know, a great deal of comment about if it gets approved, how the project and the sewer system and the water system and all that are ultimately configured and designed and all that sort of thing. And those comments will come to the town and be reviewed by Public Works and our engineers and all that sort of thing. That's way into the weeds. That's a lot of detail that no one gets into at this stage of the game.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comment?
Only other comment on that note, though, I mentioned this to Tammy before, I would love to see the enclosures like A, B, C, D be organized such that A is always Public Works, B is always school, C is always VDOT, D is always this. It would be nice to know so that as people sit on the committees, they become familiar with each section. And then as a project drags out like this, if the first reading is in ink black, with the next changes be in red, the next changes be in blue, so we can see how things evolve over time as this is reviewed and addended, if VDOT has additional comments, fire department has additional comments. What were their original comments? How did they change? To understand the changes for me, because I had a hard time deciphering through 1,000 pages what was different, what was new from month to month.
Yeah.
It would be nice if there is a change, that change gets submitted in a different color, especially since we're not printing and most of it's on here, it's not hard to do a different color. But to me, it's just a little bit of standardization that there's always some pattern to it. I'm a pattern person, but I want patterns to make sure I understand who's got comments and where to find those patterns. So I'm not looking at the Grange and VDOT's enclosure A and Mallory Point's enclosure F. You know, I want to make sure I know where to go every time.
Well, an interesting thing to consider though is this is only the fourth major rezoning in the last 30 years. Everything, it's really interesting, everything that's been developed in the town of Smithfield today that exists, that's built, was not zoned by the town of Smithfield. It was zoned by the county and annexed. That's Waterford Oaks and Wellington and Cypress Creek and all of that. Everything was, none of that was ever rezoned by the town of Smithfield. So we don't have a history of major rezonings because they just haven't ever come about until recently with the first Mallory Point, the first Mallory Point, then the Mammutus project behind the Royal Farms, then Mallory Scott, which was really kind of a revisiting Mallory Point and the addition of the Scott Farm, and now this, and that's it.
But even on a project, even if it's not rezoning, if these organizations have a place to have to review things like that, it would be nice for me to have it in a pattern, but.
Well, and, John, what was his name?
Settle. Settle.
John Settle.
So,
I mean, he was sort of carried the ball for those two projects. And of course, Tammy's got this one, so it's just, you're not dealing with the same people either, so it's, I mean, you make a good point, but things just kind of evolve.
Okay. And I just bring these points up so that the citizens of Smithfield can understand our processes and being transparent as to what we're doing. That's the only reason I'm bringing these up. Any other further comment on that? And then I just have one more question, and this is to you, Attorney Riddick. There was a statement, I was reading the minutes, it was on page 71 of the minutes, and the statement was, cash proffered.
Which minutes? The ones we're looking at tonight or another?
No, not tonight. It was from, it was from when we were discussing the Grange at 10 Main. This was in the May, and it may have been repeated it was in May and possibly the June application of that. But what was said was, and it caught my attention, was there is limits on cash proffers. And I would like, you to explain that somewhat in detail. I didn't think we could.
You can't offer just cash to do just anything. You can't just throw a big cash number as part of a proffer. It has to be identified as a money to address something in the capital improvements plan, or schools. You can't just say, well, a developer can't just say, I'll give you $10,000 a lot to do as you wish. The law doesn't allow that anymore. They used to do that.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
But
that's
they
the
don't-
limitation.
there are limitations on what proffers can, you can't offer, cash to address off-site improvements that have nothing to do with your project.
And it's not so much the dollar amount, it's a matter of identifying
It has to
specific.
do with if you think that if we have a capital improvements plan that you have identified needs and the project will have impact on these capital improvement projects that have been identified, they can offer money to address those, a portion of the cost of those items. And that's how it's been years and years ago. It used to be the developers would just say, I'll offer you X. And using Isle of Wight as an example, they had a cash proffer study that said that every lot in the county, every new lot cost $11,923 in additional cost to the locality. And so that was a presumption that if you wanted your property to be rezoned, you had to proffer $11,900, $11,600, whatever it was. It was more than $11,000 per lot, or there was a reasonable certainty you would not get your rezoning approved. And all the law has been changed about that. It's much more restricted than that, and it can't be done that way. And localities just across the state used to basically say, if you don't offer us cash, you don't get the rezoning. And it's very strict now. You can't, as a planning commission member, say, I really like your project, but you didn't offer any cash, so I'm not going to vote for it. If you were to do that, you're opened yourself up to liability for saying something like that. You've broken the law.
What about asking for a school bus, a police car, a fire truck? Is that still cash?
Well, that's a capital improvement item. That's things that you can, if it's identified as needs that have been identified that are specific to a new proposed development, they can voluntarily offer that. You can't tell us, you can't say, I want you to pay me for a school bus. Then you can't do that. Not anymore.
Okay, any further comments? Questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
We may have said it or asked when we were going through the Grange. What is the difference in the height restriction of the storage containers, storage facility, the Trey Grantley's building versus the height restriction on the Grange?
What do you mean?
That's a 4-story, correct?
Is it 4 stories?
Think so, isn't it?
I thought it was 3.
I think it's 3.
All right.
I don't know what the overall height is.
I'm
Yeah,
not
that's-
sure. I want to, it's up in the air. My question was, did we discuss the height restriction on that one that we approved versus the height restriction on the Luder project?
Would you like for me to clarify?
Yep. Go ahead, Doc.
Because people aren't living in the self-storage unit to increase density.
Still don't make no difference when all we talked about was the height. It's the same thing. When you come into Smithfield, what do you see? Then when you come into Smithfield off of Battery Park, what do you see? Same thing.
There's only a 6-foot difference between the 4-story apartment building and the 3-story apartment building. It's not about height. It's about density, setting a precedence, even though each development stands on its own. It's about setting a precedent that I don't think we want to get to a high-rise building complex of increased density in our town. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I don't see very many 4-story colonial buildings.
Well, and you can't apply colonial architecture. That's just a personal preference.
Yes.
That you can't tie a type of architecture to anything. If anything, there's been this concern that we just don't know what it's going to look like. Well, the whole point, the whole reason that the developer can't propose elevations is because if it is approved, it's completely subject to review and approval by the historic board. And so, I think all they've done is proposed, suggest things they think are going to look nice, but really it's going to be a question for the historic board to determine, is it appropriate, does it look okay, does it meet our guidelines? And so asking them to tell you what it's going to look like is a very difficult thing to do under these circumstances.
I think a lot of the discussions that we had were beyond our pay grade. Like you say, that they were going to be handled either by BHARs or town council at a later date. And we were getting involved in places that maybe we just didn't have the authority to be involved in. Now, the height thing, I understand. But still, there were things that are going to be decided later on.
It's about density for me. And so that's, it
Really?
just strictly comes down, yeah, for that. But, you know, my wife, who doesn't pay attention to everything, now rides by and say, look, that's a 4-story apartment. It's too tall.
Okay. Now, I'll just make one other observation. During my comments, I didn't get a chance to say it at town council meeting, but height, to me, is a matter of geometry. And we give, constantly, we give waivers to setbacks, yard setbacks and such. The only difference between a setback and a height restriction is the setback is horizontal, the height restriction is vertical. We're doing the same thing,
Just a different axis.
just a different axis. But we constantly approve setbacks. We had just done one, I think at the last planning commission meeting. Place on, I think, Smithfield Boulevard that was into the Chesapeake Bay.
Preservation area.
Preservation area. And I think we had done a couple, 2 or 3 meetings prior to that.
I think the really difficult thing about this whole thing has been the explanation of the planned mixed-use development concept as a whole. Because we've said it over and over and over again, but people don't seem to hear it, and that is, the whole thing was designed by you and approved by the town council with the idea that, okay, here are beginning points. These are parameters that we think are basic, and they were based on reasonable zoning districts, but it says you can have a waiver as to setbacks and a waiver as to density and things like that. With the whole idea being that bring us a project and tell us what it's gonna look like and how it's gonna be designed, and then you can ask for the waivers, because we don't want to give you carte blanche to start with. We want to make you think about this and design it in a way that's thoughtful and is appropriate for the property. And the whole concept that an applicant has asked for waivers has been construed into the assumption that you're breaking the rules. You know, why can't you live within the rules that are established by PEMA and the basic foundation, the basic minimum setbacks and things like that? And it was never meant to be absolutely static. If it was, you wouldn't have had the ability to ask for special use permits to get reductions in those minimums. And you know, citizen after citizen after citizen, and to be fair, they don't deal with this all the time, so maybe they don't understand, but I think a lot of them see this as just being, oh, he's just asking for more and more and more, and why can't he live within the parameters that the council has adopted? And it wasn't designed to be that way, and it's really hard to explain, and, you know, I don't know, I still don't know if we've explained it very well, but it is what it is.
Well, you just explained it. I mean, I understood it. I think most of us understand it, but
I think y'all understand it.
yes.
But it's clear that many people do not. And it's not an applicant, whether it's this one or the next one that comes down the pike, they're not doing anything wrong by asking for a special use permit, because you built it into the ordinance for just that purpose. Now, you may not like it, and you can reject it, like you did with the height thing.
Mhm.
I mean, you have the right to say no.
I think you explained it very well.
Well said.
But one of my comments months before all of this was, I still think we have to limit development by limiting density. Because you can't look at a developer and have a guideline and say, yeah, you're too dense, I don't like it, even though they fit our guideline to the T, without a special use permit, without anything. And so the only way to limit development is you've got to set it out first. You know, again, if you're going to have 4.5 homes per acre in a residential community, and somebody comes in at 4.3 and you say you're too dense, well, tough. Well, I look at it as tough for us. But if you're going to set up and say, we only want 2 houses per acre in a residential community, and then they're trying to get more, the way you're going to limit that development, the way you're going to limit all of this development in the county or even around is by limiting it before it gets here. That's my opinion on all of the ordinances, no matter PMUD, residential, commercial, whatever. But when we get to PMUD, you know, the interesting calculation that Ms. Vulnerable talked about was the 27.9 units per density or per acre. I think there should be a number. I don't know what that number should be, but I think, you know, if you look at it per acre, it was like 5.9 units or some crazy number. But if you look at it, however they calculated, it came out to 27.9. And so it's mind-boggling to think if we got a multifamily ordinance that says 12 units per acre, how do we get a 27 on a PMUD and 12 on a multifamily residential zoning ordinance? There's a big change between 12 and 27. You know, our multifamily, at least in our ordinance, the way the old stuff read, that was as dense as you could go, if I'm correct. But now all of a sudden we got PMUD and we're up to some crazy calculation of 27.9, depending on how you manipulate the numbers. So I think we have to think about that number. It doesn't have to be decided tonight, but you got to think about if we do other PMUDs in the future, at what density, because if you put all apartment buildings in there, you might get up to a number of 60 units per acre. But he just happens to have residential. So you've got to have some balance of how are you distributing the population over that land. And so again, I don't know how to limit that, but it gets very dense very quickly when you start putting multi-unit buildings in. And my process is all right, limit numbers, limit heights, limit that. You know, a horizontal setback, you know, as my good friend used to say, they aren't making any more land. Horizontal, you only got so much land. Vertical, sky's the limit based on your foundation. So there's a lot that can go vertical, but not as much can go horizontal because you just don't have but so much volume that way. So I don't know the answer to that, but as we look at this, and if you're trying to say we don't want this many houses on 30 acres, well, then you got to limit the number of houses you allow per acre so that they're just limited. But that's just my thoughts on that.
Point well made. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Planning Commission comments closed. That brings us to item number 7, approval of Tuesday, June 13th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Well, I've read them, Mr. Chairman, and they're very long, but this lady over here, does a very good job, and I didn't find anything that we should change, so I recommend they be approved as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the June 13th, 2023 meeting minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Item 7 is approved. Item number 8, approval of the Tuesday, July 11th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I read those too, and they're actually exactly half as long, and I don't see anything that should be changed in there either, so I recommend they be approved.
So moved.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the July 11th, 2023 meetings. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Item number 8 is approved. No further business? No comments? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.